Welcome back to Esthetics Magazine. Find more skincare resources at aestheticsmagazine.com. In today's episode, we will be discussing anatomy and the nervous system. The central nervous system is made up of the brain and spinal cord, while the peripheral nervous system is composed of all the other nerves in the body. The brain is protected by the skull, and the spinal cord is protected by the vertebrae. These two areas come together to form one complete system, a command center for interpreting the messages sent by the body and for communicating a response. The brain contains about 100 billion neurons, all of which generate and transmit electrical impulses. These neurons can receive two different types of signals. Neurotransmitters or electric impulses can either promote or inhibit the further generation of electrical impulses. Sometimes chemicals in the brain can also block the neural impulses. This combined system of electrical and chemical messages makes it possible for the brain to carry out a multitude of complex functions. Hormones and other chemicals in the blood provide essential communication and coordination between the body and the nervous system. When the brain perceives any of these messages, it sends out signals that prompt the appropriate action. Sometimes a signal travels through the nervous system on a particular path or nerve route. Other times, only one neuron may transmit messages from one location to another within the nervous system. This organization of the nervous system is important to note. When something goes wrong, a medical professional can often determine the area responsible for the symptoms. Neural signals can vary from a few miles per hour to about 180 miles per hour. Some sensory signals sent to the spinal cord are immediately acted on through a simple relay without any input from the brain. These types of signals are known as reflexes. For example, when someone touches an extremely hot surface, pain receptors in the skin send signals along sensory nerves into the spinal cord. There, the sensory neurons transmit the message to motor neurons to move the hand away from the heat. This entire neural operation occurs without any feedback from the brain. Neurons. When a person is startled by a loud noise, sensory receptors in the ear send a message to the brain. However, when the brain receives this information, interneurons might analyze the information and decide that a stronger message should be sent from the brain to the muscles. These interneurons would connect the sensory neurons in the ear to the neurons in the brain, and then connect the neurons in the brain to motor neurons. In this way, the interneurons increase the amplitude of the signal, helping to assure an effective response to the noise. Last, there are interneurons. Interneurons are responsible for forming connections within the central nervous system. They make up the majority of neurons in the human body, and scientists estimate that there are more than 100 billion interneurons in the human body. Unlike sensory neurons and motor neurons, interneurons have no long axons that travel long distances. They stay in a specific area of the central nervous system. Their main job is to connect sensory neurons and motor neurons to each other. However, this doesn't mean that the connections formed by interneurons are always straightforward. In fact, much of what we would consider higher-level thinking, like decision-making and problem-solving, relies on the complex networks formed by interneurons in the brain. The second type of neuron, the motor neuron, is responsible for transmitting signals from the central nervous system to muscles. These signals can have many different effects. For example, they might make muscles contract or relax, or cause certain glands to release chemicals. Motor neurons have long structures called axons that allow them to quickly transmit signals to distant areas of the body where the signal's effects are elicited. In contrast, sensory neurons only need to transmit signals to a nearby area of the central nervous system. There are three different kinds of neurons: sensory neurons, motor neurons, and interneurons. Sensory neurons are responsible for transmitting sensory information to the central nervous system. All sensory neurons have a structure that allows them to detect a specific kind of external information. For example, there are light-sensitive neurons in the retina of the eye. These neurons are able to send messages about what the eye is detecting to the brain. To communicate with one another, neurons send and receive electric impulses along pathways in the central nervous system. At the end of each pathway, the last neuron in the series sends a message to another neuron or to an effector. Effector, in this context, refers to a gland, muscle, or organ. For example, One pathway might begin in cells lining the stomach, send a message to neurons in the stomach wall, and end in the stomach muscle. The message started when sensory receptors in the stomach detected food. These receptors transform the presence of food into a nerve signal, which starts the pathway. Central nervous system. The central nervous system is made up of the brain and spinal cord. The brain, one of the most complex and highly organized structures in the body, is protected by the skull. It is made up of three main parts: the cerebrum, the cerebellum, and the brainstem. These parts are responsible for things such as thoughts and actions, balance and coordination. The spinal cord is a long bundle of nerves that runs from the brain down the back. It is enclosed in and protected by the bony vertebral column. The spinal cord is the main pathway for information connecting the brain and peripheral nervous system. The peripheral nervous system refers to the parts of the nervous system outside the brain and spinal cord. It includes the cranial nerves and spinal nerves from their roots beginning at the back of the head to the end of the spinal cord. The main function of the central nervous system is to process and store information and coordinate the transmission of information to and from the brain. It is made up of millions of neurons organized into interconnected circuits or networks. Neurons in the CNS do not have as large a capacity for regeneration as those in the peripheral nervous system, since the neurons in the brain and spinal cord do not have neurons of their cell body to support and assist with their growth and survival. The central nervous system is also part of the body's main control system. It issues orders to the other parts of the body through both the nervous system and the endocrine system. It uses the sensory information coming from the outside world and inside the body in order for the body to work correctly. However, the spinal cord acts as a link between the brain and the outside world. It runs at the back, protecting the spinal cord from damage in case of injury. It allows the brain to receive information and send messages to the body in order to react to things such as feeling hot or cold, touching something painful, and having difficulties with muscles. Peripheral nervous system. The two divisions of the peripheral nervous system are the somatic system and the autonomic system. The somatic system controls the actions of our body's functions that we can consciously direct. This is also called the voluntary nervous system. This system is what we use when we move or control our muscles. The second division of the peripheral nervous system is the autonomic system, which controls the regulation of our body's activities without our awareness. For example, our autonomic system makes our heart beat, and our food is digested without us having to consciously think about it. This system is also called the involuntary system. Although we can't control the autonomic system as easily as the somatic system, the autonomic system keeps a check on the functions of the somatic system. It does this by the coordination of our body and brain. For example, if you are hurt or in danger, a signal of the pain that was detected by the somatic system gets sent to the brain, making you feel symptoms, and the autonomic system is alerted. It's time to level up your skincare product expertise. Are you confident explaining vitamins A, C, and E to your clients? Stop guessing. Get the Essential Guide by Greg Risha, Understanding Vitamins in Skincare. Get your copy today at aestheticsmagazine.com.